welcome to the Tuesday, April 26, 2022 regular meeting of the Board of County Commissioners. I will now call this meeting to order. We're fully assembled and we'll begin today with adjustments to the agenda. Mr. Mokrahajski, are there any adjustments that you're aware of to the agenda?
No.
From the board, I see none. Then we'll move along to emergency business. Do we have any emergency business to conduct today? We don't. Thank you so much. Then we'll move along. Ms. Jones will move now to public comments. And as always, I'll ask you to manage the queue for public comments. Speakers are going to be taken in the order they sign up and limited to 3 minutes per public comment. If what it says here is if the number exceeds 10 speakers, then additional speakers may be allowed. Our practice has been always to allow speakers 3 minutes until the number of speakers who sign up are exhausted. So we will continue that practice today. And I will also say this, that any public testimony that you would like to have in written form for today's meeting needs to be submitted 24 hours prior to the meetings. 24 hours, correct, Ms. Jones?
That's correct. That's to give you time to actually review it before the meeting.
So any written testimony provided from this point forward will be considered for the next public comment session. So today, when you'll be given 3 minutes, I'm not going to give you a warning when you're getting close to the 3 minutes. Keep an eye on the clock because at 3 minutes, the microphone will be silenced and we'll move along to the next speaker or the next item on the agenda. So Ms. Jones, do we have anyone signed up today for public comment?
Thank you, Chair Farr. Yes, I do see we have people signed up. At this point, if you have signed up to join in public comment, please raise your virtual hand so I can see that you would like to present during public comment. And I will call upon you in the order that the hands are being raised. Our first presenter is David Eigel. Let me go ahead and switch my screen to get the timer up so everyone can see it. And we will begin our public comment right after that. One moment.
Thank you, Ms. Jones.
There we go. Share that screen. And David, I will go ahead and unmute your microphone and you may begin your public testimony.
Thank you. The Dunn Hall denaming scandal is definitely a matter of concern to the Lane County Commissioners because first, promoting an honest understanding of our heritage is one of the many responsibilities of the Commission. And two, the Commission funds the Lane County History Museum. The Lane County History Museum, under the misdirection of the thankfully retiring Bob Hart, has been misusing public funds provided by Lane County. This funding was supposed to be used to further an understanding of our heritage. Instead, some of these funds have been used by ideologues to promote their own narrative that is contradicted by documented history. Mr. Hart's personal friend, the bungling U of O historian Marcia Wiesiger, is one of the 3 historians who signed her name to the disgraceful Dunn report. In 2019, I phoned Mr. Hart and made an appointment to see him without informing him of my motive. My intention was to arrange for a donation of money and materials to the Lane County History Museum to document the true history of the late Professor Dunn. Hart subsequently canceled the appointment by email, stating that he had learned of my work regarding Dunn and the Klan. He cited his relationships with the U of O Museum of Natural History, and the Black Pioneers. All of these groups have been involved in promoting the discredited Dunn leader of the Klan fable. On September 1st, 2021, I furnished Mr. Hart with extensive materials that demonstrate without question that the Dunn report is a fraud. I never heard from Hart. I subsequently joined the Lane History Museum as a member, and at the annual meeting conducted over Zoom, Willie Richardson of the Black Pioneers spoke. During Q&A in the chat, I asked a question about Professor Dunn. Mr. Hart, acting as moderator, ignored my question. When I asked in chat why my question had been ignored, Hart unlawfully removed me from the meeting. I have sent this information to the board of the Lane County Historical Society. No one has contacted me or even sent a link to me to copy with a copy of the meeting. On Thursday, the Black Pioneers exhibit opens at the Lane County History Museum. The public needs to be informed of the Black Pioneers promotion of historical fiction, not history. The commissioners need to take action. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Eigel.
Thank you. Thank you for your public comment. Our next speaker will be, sorry, I've got to get the speaker, Melinda Stone, followed by Rick Reese. Melinda, I will unmute your microphone and you may begin your public testimony. Melinda, I do show yourself muted.
Okay, can
There
you
you go.
Yes, I'm here to voice my concern for the County Commission's take on the COVID directives that have rolled out back and forth since March of 2020. I have learned it. What I have learned is that many members, if not all, believe that the mandates have not harmed the community, despite the fact that a mandate is not a law and cannot supersede any law. Claiming the mandates are gone is the second point. You're wrong on both accounts, and here's why. Because of the so-called mandates here in Lane County, I have suffered greatly by many, mostly locally owned businesses, feeling that they must or have the right to refuse access to the inside of their businesses if I do not wear a mask. I have video recordings at least 14 of more than 20 businesses that harassed me for trying to patron their business with my federal, state, and local anti-discrimination and anti-hate laws, protecting my right to do so. In fact, I was falsely arrested at a grocery store on February 18th, 2021 by the Eugene police for, as the officer stated in the affidavit of probable cause, quote, trespassed from all market of choice stores for refusing to follow store policies regarding masks, unquote, despite the main store manager giving me permission in December of 2020 to not wear a mask. After over a year and 2 months of court appearances at Eugene Municipal Court, including 2 failed trials and a rigged third trial where I was removed by police to sit in an empty courtroom while the jury trial saw no human being at the defendant's table. I was found guilty and sentenced to 5 days in Lane County Jail, which I served last week. I sat in solitary confinement, falsely called quarantine, for 4 days before being released due to severe dehydration and starvation. And thanks to my husband and support of friends, and you, Joe Burney, for being proactive in contacting the jail to request an investigation as to my condition, which he was to get a report back to my husband, I was released before the 5th day. As for the notion of mandates being gone, they're not. Governor Brown still claims that we are under an emergency order because she has not been challenged by the state legislature to stop her overreaching.
Thank you for your public comments. Our next speaker is Rick Reese, followed by Mo Young. Rick, I will unmute your microphone and you may begin your public testimony.
Thank you. My name is Richard Reese, and I'm just bringing to the commissioner's attention a problem that we've just recently run into. Let me lay the groundwork quickly. There is a home that my wife, I'm sorry, let me get started here. I realized the clock just started. I wanted to bring a serious problem to the attention of the commissioners that they may not know about. There is a home, let me set the groundwork first. There's a home that my wife's family has owned for nearly 60 years, bought it in 1964, and it's on Mercer Lake, just north of Florence. An electrical fire burned it down on February 11th. But before that, the property was a dairy farm from the time of Western Lane County settlement until the 50s. It was a feed and seed operation after that. Upon my mother-in-law's death, my wife inherited it in 2012. And at that time, we started preparing it to be a retirement home for ourselves. And in that period of time, we gutted the interior, new floors were put in, completely repainted it, put a new kitchen, new bath, like I said, floors and paint, preparing it to be our retirement home. Unfortunately, the fire burned it so that only the chimneys and the foundation remain. When I went to Lane County Planning to start the permitting process to rebuild it, we were told that we can't rebuild because we were told by the county planning that we can't rebuild because of some kind of murky reinterpretation, which I don't understand entirely, of application of zoning laws. Now, again, there've been residents on there for well over 100 years. The existing house was somewhere between 60 and 70 years old. And there are many other homeowners in Lane County that are at similar risk who probably don't even know it. While this was not yet our primary residence, we were preparing it to be our retirement home. And now we're being told that we can't rebuild anything at all. And that's really a huge problem. It's a huge financial setback for us, with a serious loss of the investment that we put into it. But there are probably hundreds of other Lane County homeowners in a similar position that don't realize it, that if an arsonist comes and burns down their home, they won't be able to rebuild. And in our case, it was likely mice that chewing on the wires that burned our place down. But we hope we can find a solution soon. Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Mr. Reese.
Thank you for your public comment. Our next presenter is Mo Young, followed by Gary Rose. Mo, I will unmute your microphone and you may begin your public comment.
Good morning, commissioners. I'm here today to speak as a member of the Lane County community and not as a county employee. I wanted to thank you all for considering making Juneteenth a paid holiday for county employees. This day has been important in my community for more than 150 years. This will be the third year that there's a community-wide celebration here in Lane County, and I do hope to see you there. I just want to take a minute to share a story about why this Independence Day is special to me. At my parents' house, there is a small ceramic cup. We call it the Freedom Cup, and the story behind that cup is as follows. My dad was given the cup by his mother, Johnny Marie Sisk, who was given the cup by her mother, who had received it from her grandmother, who had taken it from the plantation house the day that the soldiers from the North came and told enslaved people that they were free. This house was in Marion, North Carolina, and this happened on April 19th of 1965, which was 2 full months before the last enslaved people were told they were free. I can't imagine being enslaved. I can't imagine being lied to about being enslaved when freedom had already been established. I can't imagine learning that I had been lied to and then running into the house of the people who had lied to me and taking something. And I am so grateful that my 4th great-grandmother did. Because of her, I have a piece of history that means I will never, ever forget that our country was built on the backs of my family and other Black and brown families. Because of her, I have something tangible that shows that although these terrible things happened, my people are fighters. And that is something that I celebrate always, and especially on June 19th each year. Making Juneteenth as a paid holiday is in line with Lane County's values. It's a way that you can show people like me that our family's experiences are important, and it's a way to show everyone that it's a day to observe and learn about our country's history. I hope that Lane County continues to be a leader in centering equity in the decisions that are made. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Young.
Thank you for your public comment. Our next speaker is Gary Rose, and I do show that Gary is our last speaker. So Gary, I will unmute your microphone and you may begin your public comment. Gary, I do show you are self-muted.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Affirmative.
Okay. Well, my name is Gary Rose. I live at 86555 Rose Hill Road in Florence, Oregon. First of all, I'd like to thank the commissioners for the opportunity to be here today. I am here to sound an alarm just to make sure that all of the county commissioners are informed of what is happening in our impacted forest and farm zones. It has come to my attention on 3 different occasions. One,
the house had burnt down, and Mr. Reed just spoke of that. And two others went in to inquire. They have F2 property. If the house burnt down, could they rebuild it? They were all three informed, no, they cannot. Their reasoning to do this is 1,000 Friends of Oregon and Land Watch will challenge their decision if they do issue a permit. I'm not aware of any decision that gave these groups this kind of power over our staff. This all hinges on the interpretation of one word. That word is has. Lane County Code, Chapter 16, Section 211, subsection 3, parentheses D. Alterations, restorations, or replacement of a lawfully established dwelling subject to the following: has intact interior walls, has roof structure, has plumbing, has sanitary disposal, has interior wiring, and has a heating system. Staff has interpreted after a fire dwelling, the dwelling no longer has these characteristics. However, if you read the code, it states alteration, restorations, replacement of a lawfully established dwelling meeting this criteria. Once that dwelling has been built, it has met that criteria, and the requirement of that dwelling meets all requirements asked for at that point. And I believe that carries on. The interpretation leaves open many frightening scenarios. If the septic system fails, it no longer has a disposal system. If the windstorm comes and a tree collapses the roof structure, that is gone as well. The state has stepped in to exempt the dwellings destroyed in the holiday fire from this requirement. And that should tell you there that there is something needs our attention. The statement from the staff to me was they could go ahead and issue the permit, but 1,000 Friends of Oregon and Land Watch will challenge it and become very expensive. I believe this is a county issue, and the county needs to defend our rights and not let these groups bully our citizens of Lane County. Thank you very much. I appreciate your time.
Thank you, Mr. Rose.
Thank you for your public comment. At this time, we have no more hands raised for public comment, so I will return the meeting to you, Chair Farr.
Thank you, Ms. Jones, for managing the queue. At this point, we will move along to item 4 on the agenda, which is a commissioner's response to public comments and or other issues or remonstrances. I will look to a hand raised queue for the commissioners. We'll begin with Commissioner Buck.
Thank you, Chair. I appreciate those that have been commenting this morning for public testimony. I, in particular, wanted to talk about the issue that came up for two folks, which is rebuilding after a fire when you're in certain zones. I've actually been trying to work on this myself for a couple of folks as well. So it's interesting to know that this is these dual conversations are happening on the west side. It is an issue if folks' homes burn down due to whatever reason, most likely a fire, hopefully not an arson, but it's very possible with fires happening around our region. And there's some language in code that makes it very challenging for people to rebuild in some of those zones. I've been inquiring about this through the land management department as well. It's my understanding that there is a possible legislative fix that our legislative committee might be working on in order to bring this to the state. From what I've been hearing, it is the language in the state code that is the problem, and that will require a legislative fix. So I will be continuing to watch this myself, and hopefully we will come up with a solution. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Commissioner Buck. Commissioner Bozevich.
Thank you, Chair. I've been following this issue around replacement post-fire or or natural disaster of some kind for a while since it was brought to my attention. I am going to ask the board under Commissioner's business to direct staff to take the interpretation that once a dwelling has been lawfully established with walls, roof, etc., they have a right for replacement, and will let Land Watch and Thousand Friends take the heat for stopping the rebuilding of a house that burned down. We should not preemptively be not issuing permits for fear of an appeal. We need to build 16,403 new dwelling units over the next 5 years in this county, and eliminating the ability to replace burned down homes in forest zones is just adding to that need. So I will be asking for the board to direct staff to take a certain interpretation. And I believe it's in accordance with the law. I've read the ORS. I think our staff is taking a wildly incorrect interpretation. None of the other 35 counties in the state take that interpretation. And even DLCD doesn't agree. So I think we need to just have staff take the interpretation. They can issue the permit for Mr. Reese, and let Land Watch and Thousand Friends take the heat publicly for stopping somebody from rebuilding a home that burned down.
Thank you, Commissioner Bozovich. Commissioner Burney.
Thank you, Chair. So it's interesting, the last two commissioners that spoke agree with one another. One stated in heated terms and one stated as an issue in her first term that she wants to see resolved. I'm sorry this hasn't come to our attention before. I think it makes a lot of sense to look into this. So I'm pleased for that. Secondly, I would like to make a statement just to share with this body that one of our predecessors, Commissioner Bill Dwyer, as we're talking about houses being burned, his home was burned to the ground not far from where I live only a couple of days ago. He is currently homeless. He is an elder gentleman in his 80s. We all know him. And I just want to state that he falls in this same pattern we're seeing. He does not live in forest zone land. That is not his issue, but just I want to let this board and let the public know that if you know of anyone that has a place for lease, we have one of our own that is unhoused now and is vulnerable. He'll never tell you he's vulnerable, but I'm telling you he is. And I would like to make a statement here. This body is supposed to be nonpartisan. Ms. Stone, Melinda Stone, who I've not met, mentioned that I did, in fact, intervene when I heard no one else was. And whether I agree or not with some of the statements she made about mandates, that's not the issue. The issue is that this is a human life. This is someone that needed attention in the jail. And this was one of several hundred over the last year, people that have given me the greatest gratification, not standing up here and making political points, but under the radar, taking the leverage and the ability we have as commissioners to help people that need help. And it was just, that's what I find gratifying. And Ms. Stone, I'm delighted that I was able to intervene, that we have the head of the county jail, Captain Riley, who immediately responded, immediately looked into your situation, and immediately provided relief. So really, honestly, that's an example of working with county staff that really do care, and when problems are brought to their attention and we move off of this political nonsense and just try to help people, we can do that a lot. And Ms. Stone, I'm just delighted that I was able to help you. That's all for now. I look forward to the discussion of Juneteenth, and I thank everyone for bringing all this information to our attention. Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Commissioner Burney, and thank you, commissioners, for your responses. I'll just say this: I'm looking forward to further discussion regarding what I would consider to be a binary, I'll use the term binary approach to the issue of replacing burned dwellings. Look forward to hearing Commissioner Buck's further comments regarding the legislative fix, and Commissioner Bozovich's further comments regarding the current situation that potentially can be mitigated. So with that, we'll move along down our, with no further items from the board. We'll move along to a, let's see, our consent calendar. We have before us a consent calendar. The consent calendar for April 22nd, 2022. Do I have a motion?
Chair, I'll move we pass the consent calendar for April 26, 2022.
Second.
Moved by Vice Chair Triga, seconded by Commissioner Burney. Discussion to the motion? I see none. Then I will call for the vote. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Passes 5-0 unanimously. Thank you very much. And we'll move along, Mr. Mokrajewski, to item 6 on our agenda. We have before us Order 220426-06 in the matter of recognizing Juneteenth and designation of June 19th as a paid holiday for all eligible Lane County employees. Mr. Mokrajewski, I'll turn it over to you to introduce your panel.
Thank you, Chair. We have Alana Holmes, our Human Resources Director, Latife Amato, our Equity Manager, and Inga Wood, our Labor Relations Manager here. I believe Mr. Rickoff is also with us, and this group is going to walk you through the discussions that we've had, both with our bargaining units and surveys that have been done with other local organizations on how they're handling this holiday. And we have some options and recommendations for you, and of course, open to the board's thoughts. I want to make it clear that the board order that we put forward is based on previous conversations that we have had and interest expressed by several of our bargaining units. We understand that ultimately it is the Board of Commissioners that will determine what the final decision will be here, and there certainly are some options that you can consider related to that. But we're pleased to be in front of you to present this topic, and so I'll turn it over, I think, to Alana to kick off the conversation.
Thank you, Mr. Mokrajewski, and welcome, Ms. Amato, to your first presentation to the board. We'll try to be easy. Thank you, Ms. Mokrajewski.
All right. Good morning, Chair, Commissioners. Alana Holmes, Chief Human Resources Officer here at Lane County. We're here today asking the board to consider recognizing Juneteenth as a county holiday and approve a paid holiday to all eligible Lane County employees. This is now both a state and federally recognized holiday that recognizes the emancipation of enslaved African Americans. This is celebrated annually on June 19th. The discussion today is to advance the conversation based on previous and current negotiations with several bargaining units. With me today are Latife Amato, our Equity Manager, who will speak to this item, and Inga Wood is here to answer any questions regarding the interplay with our unions, as this is also considered a mandatory subject of bargaining. We have a small time window to present, so I will be brief, as most of this information is also in the board memo prepared for this session. So a little bit of background. Juneteenth is an annual observation recognizing the Emancipation Proclamation, which occurred on January 1st, 1863. But all remaining slaves in Texas did not receive this news until June 19th of 1865. So on this day, 42 states in the United States, including the District of Columbia, celebrate the abolition of slavery, which gave all African Americans freedom and equal rights. This day is also known as Freedom Day and Emancipation Day, and is widely recognized in African American communities nationwide. On June 17th, 2021, the President of the United States officially declared Juneteenth a federal holiday. And in June of 2021, the state of Oregon unanimously passed House Bill 2168, declaring June 19th of each year as Juneteenth an official holiday. 8 other states have also made Juneteenth an official state holiday. Discussions with county leadership have also led to the recommendation we are providing today for your deliberation and consideration. If the board is interested in taking more time, there will certainly be other options that we can explore. And we can talk about those as we wrap up. With respect to policy issues, the board decides what days are recognized as holidays for the Lane County workforce and delegates to Human Resources implementation. With Juneteenth less than 2 months away, we also have provided a board order in the event that the board, after discussion, decides to move forward on this recommendation. So with respect to board goals, the vision of Lane County is to be the best county in which all can live, work, and play. The adoption of Juneteenth as a recognized holiday aligns with the Vibrant Community Strategic Goal Key Initiative, enhance equity and access in service delivery and representation in governance. Recognizing Juneteenth as a paid holiday for all eligible employees is in alignment with the strategic goal, our people in partnerships. Human Resources staff conducted a survey of jurisdictions and employers in Oregon in regards to Juneteenth as a paid holiday. Of the 30 respondents, 15 currently recognize June 19th as a paid holiday for their eligible employees. Lane County Administrative Procedures Manual establishes a standard for policy and process for holidays. Lane County currently observes 9 paid holidays and 1 floating holiday. The addition of a 10th paid holiday is consistent with the 11 days state and federal employees do receive. So to summarize, we are currently in negotiations with several bargaining units, and this is a topic of interest. We would recommend the approval of recognizing Juneteenth as a holiday and designating June 19th as a paid holiday for all Lane County eligible employees. As we wrap up, just to highlight that we are close to a timeline that would be needed for departments to be able to manage closures and considerations for the staffing of 24/7 operations, as well as other administrative duties, such as creating codes for timesheet purposes, et cetera, and to be able to do that well. It is not our desire to press you for a decision, but ensure the opportunity for your discussion and direction on this item today. Now, Latife is going to provide a few thoughts on how this topic relates to our equity commitment and work at the county, and Inga is here for any labor relations questions. When Latife is done, I'll circle back for some closing comments. Thank you. Latife?
Thank you, Ms. Holmes.
Thank you, Alana. Thank you, Lane County Board of Commissioners, for the opportunity to present today on the importance of Juneteenth, adopting Juneteenth as an official holiday. While this is a bargaining conversation, there is very strong overlap to our equity work as well. And I want to just begin by grounding us in the concept of belonging and how it fits into our equity work. Then I'll give us a brief history of Juneteenth and the importance of our community adopting the holiday. So I begin by grounding us on the concept of belonging because a sense of belonging is powerful and essential to the human experience. Belonging, as it sits in the diversity, equity, and inclusion space, helps us see the ultimate goal of ensuring that all of our community members have agency. Agency to drive change, agency to reshape systems and institutions, and agency in making demands of our society. I also want to define community in the way that I am defining it on this call to mean our internal employees and our external partners and people. So it is no secret that the state of Oregon has been extremely exclusionary of many marginalized communities. And today we have the opportunity to acknowledge that, and we have the opportunity to repair some of the harm done to our African-American communities. This is just a beginning step in a long road to repair harm, to build trust, and to reimagine spaces of greater belonging. Juneteenth, short for June 19th, marks the day when federal troops arrived in Galveston, Texas in 1865 to take control of the state and ensure that all enslaved people were freed. And if you're not already asking yourself why this event came 2.5 years after the signing of the Emancipation Proclamation, then take this opportunity to reflect on why that was and the effect that this has had on the relationship to government. Adopting Juneteenth as an official holiday is one of the first steps that we can take to ensure that we are making American descendants of slavery feel seen, welcomed, and affirmed. And to celebrate Juneteenth and to celebrate the end of slavery in the United States is a path that we should proudly walk alongside our African-American community. It is already a federally and state adopted holiday, and joining on this effort is essential to our work in bridging our communities to the work of government. As this is my first time presenting to the board, and given my role as equity manager, I also just wanted to take the opportunity to present a framework in which we discuss issues of race. A process, to me, is just as important as a decision made. So I'm going to ask that we select our words and actions with kindness and respect for our BIPOC community. Sometimes being physically disconnected, we can dismiss or forget about our humanity and our common experience and universal need for belonging. When I was a school leader, there's one rule that we always abided by when speaking about our students. Speak about our students as if their loved ones were in the room. And we, the BIPOC community, are in the room. We are listening, and we are hopeful that we can together with you reimagine and expand belonging in our space. Also, as part of the framework, I also want to name that sometimes, even with good intentions, our impact can sometimes be the opposite of what was intended. So while I'm excited to have the BIPOC community listening in on this call, I want to make sure that we are not doing more harm than good. So know that your presence is appreciated and felt, and we do not want you to sit through anything that might instill pain or hurt. So if at any point you feel that, I encourage you and really ask you to log off, as there is no need to participate in any platform that may not feel safe for you. And then finally, as part of our framework, and if this is accessible to you, I invite you to take a deep breath with me. And remember that hope is a practice. So thank you. I'm going to pass it back to the board for questions.
Thank you, Ms. Amato and Ms. Holmes. Any further presentation, Ms. Holmes?
Chair, commissioners, just a little wrap up. So I just want to remind you of what is needed to have in place for our departments that do provide 24/7 operations and other staffing needs. And, you know, we are kind of in this time frame where if the decision of the board is to move forward with this item, we would need to have some time to implement this well, and also to provide adequate notice to the communities that we serve. It isn't our desire to press for a decision today, but to provide you with timely information on a topic that you have heard the reasons why we're here today. As always, we're open to the feedback from the board and have put forward an order in the interest of being efficient with time. The decision is the board's to make, and we do look forward to your discussion on this item and your direction to staff. Thank you so much.
And thank you, Ms. Mokrajski. At this point, I'm going to turn it over to the board for questions. But really quickly, I'd like to say something that you said, Ms. Amato, that I've never heard it quite put the way you just said it. Speak as if students' loved ones were in the room. Well, we don't have students, but speak as if people's loved ones are in the room. I think that's a good practice for us to use wherever we are and whenever we are. Thank you for saying that. Then we'll move forward. The staff's recommendation today is that we approve the recognizing Juneteenth as a holiday and designate June 19th as a paid holiday for all eligible Lane County employees. We'll be discussing Order 2204-2606 that's before us, which would establish the practice beginning June 19th of this year. So with that, I'm going to look to the queue for questions and comments from the board. We will begin with Commissioner Bozovich.
Thank you, Chair. So it's my understanding we have had 9 paid holidays and 1 floating holiday for a number of years here in Lane County. I believe that was the practice when I became a board member. That was our policy. Since then, the state has adopted 2 new holidays, and the county has recognized one of those 2, which is Indigenous Peoples Day and Juneteenth. We're being asked to recognize one of those 2 holidays, and I have absolutely no problem with recognizing Juneteenth as a holiday. My concern is now we have adding a paid holiday, and we still have Indigenous Peoples Day that we declared as a county holiday, but are not doing a paid holiday for. So I kind of am a little bit torn about this. And this is probably maybe even a good question for Ms. Amato, is would a floating holiday be appropriate so people could choose which holiday to celebrate, you know, if they're more connected with Indigenous Peoples Day or if they're more connected with Juneteenth? You know, it's interesting, you know, for me, December 6th, 1865 is a very important day because that was actually the adoption of the 13th Amendment when it truly ended slavery in this country, because even after the Emancipation Proclamation, slavery was still legal in Kentucky and Delaware and practiced in California and even in some northern states, all the way up to December 6, 1865. The Emancipation Proclamation only dealt with states that were currently in rebellion. And it was a wartime executive order that may not have had force post-war. So little interesting pieces of history. So I'm kind of wondering, you know, would a floating holiday that recognizes people's decisions to do that, and at the same time, it also would be helpful to some of our 24/7 operations, and also keeping county services running for another day, which services much of these communities. So, Ms. Amato, any thoughts on having that holiday float so it could cover both holidays?
Thank you, Commissioner Bozich. And a clarification, that would be a second floating holiday. So, Ms. Amato.
Yeah, I was hoping to pass it to Alana to speak to the comparison of how many paid holidays we have compared to other community partners. And I will be super happy to speak about the floating holiday idea as it fits within the equity work afterwards.
Thank you, Latife. I don't have a breakdown of all of our comparators on all of their holidays. I am trying to find information on, let's see, a chart here. Bear with me just a moment. There is, I know a county that's not our comparator, Klamath County, has 10 calendar holidays and 2 floating holidays. And then Inga, I'm not sure if you have a breakdown more. We really looked at what the federal government provided and what the state of Oregon provided, and then Lane County specifically on breakouts of certain days. We certainly could compile that information and bring that back if that is of interest to the board.
Yeah, and I will just add a couple of comments here. So there is just one that we, and like Alana said, we can bring back as many, you know, which ones have floating holidays. For our 5 county comparators that we look at, Clackamas County and Washington County do recognize it as an official paid holiday, and Deschutes and Marion County are looking to recognize it as well in their negotiations this year. So I can't tell you exactly how many have the floating holiday. I will say from an administrative perspective, because I help payroll a lot with the interpretation of the CBAs, and when those holidays are floating holidays are what we call born into the system, and when those expire in a fiscal year, they're difficult administratively to track. It's difficult for managers and supervisors to make sure those are utilized before they expire in a fiscal year. And especially if we are going to look at this holiday being essentially added to in a fiscal year on June 19th, that would be a very short window to have employees utilize that before the end of the fiscal year. So those are just some things to consider as you're looking at a floating holiday. We have 1 floating holiday currently, and that's the day after Thanksgiving. So we have a good amount of time to use that in the fiscal year before that expires. So it's a little bit easier to manage. Also too, recognizing obviously our 24/7 operations, but we do a lot of work obviously with the federal government and the state government. And so recognizing it on the same day that those offices are closed helps a little bit with the interactions there as well.
Thank you, Ms. Wood.
Chair, if I may, and Inga, I'm sorry if you said this and I didn't hear it. What I can also tell you, she talked about our 5 comparator counties and their status with respect to this holiday. I can tell you some of our local regional partners, for example, the City of Eugene, Lane Community College, and the University of Oregon also have designated this as a holiday for their workforce as well, if that's helpful for you.
May I interject a quick question on that, Ms. Holmes? Are their offices closed on that day then?
Yes, this will be considered a paid holiday for the for those that I just spoke to, some of our regional partners.
Thank you, which seems to me the one difference between a floating holiday and an actual declared date of holiday, and that is whether or not Lane County offices are open or closed. So back to you, Ms. Amata. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Commissioner. So I think from the equity perspective, replacing the floating holiday will create really more division between communities. And that could potentially feed into a scarcity mindset that is not real or conducive to community healing. I read something interesting from Dr. Peter Coleman, the author of the book, The Way Out, that trust is the connective tissue that holds communities or government together. And that if we make decisions over scarce resources in a context that's devoid of trust, we actually fill that void with suspicion. And I think the last thing that we want to do as leaders is create more division or suspicion between our communities. So I would imagine that we would consider, future holidays at a future date. But yeah, that's just my perspective from the equity lens.
Thank you, Ms. Moto. Commissioner Bozievich, does that satisfy your question to this point?
Sorry, finding the unmute button. It does. I'm still a little bit uncomfortable with another day our offices are closed to the public. But I understand how important this holiday has become to the BIPOC community, and I'm not going to stand in the way of it becoming a holiday. I was just trying to think a little bit more ahead of other things. Thinking in the past, we combined Lincoln and Washington's birthdays to President's Day, and that gave room to have a celebration of Martin Luther King Jr.'s birthday. So that it's not unusual to think about holidays in an aggregate in some ways. So I'm just trying to have a thoughtful discussion about our policy, also considering the fact that everybody just got their budget books for this year, and we understand that while we're doing okay with the current glut of federal and state funds that we've gotten, our projections 3 years out aren't looking quite as good, and this does have budgetary impact, particularly to those departments like the sheriff's office that have to operate 24/7. So I'm trying to weigh all that together and getting an understanding of that. I do know that floating holiday has always been supposedly the day after Thanksgiving, and was why it was bargained that way, because not everybody gets to take that day off. I'll sit back. I do want to, like Mr. Eigel, I like to be accurate with history, and post Juneteenth, the day after, slavery was still legal in 2 states in the U.S. and was practiced in multiple others. And the true ending of slavery was the passage of the 13th Amendment on December 6th. But Juneteenth was important because that was when Texas was emancipated by the Union Army, when they showed up in Galveston. And it became an important celebration for the slave community, and the celebration spread throughout the South and has become their celebration of their freedom. So I'm not going to, over historic accuracy, deny that holiday and that celebration. So I'll just sit back and follow the board's will.
Thank you, Commissioner Bozievich. Next is Commissioner Burney. And first, Commissioner Burney, I'm going to read what from our board order, what the actual the statement surrounding Juneteenth. Juneteenth is the annual observation recognizing the emancipation of enslaved African Americans, commemorating the abolition of slavery in the United States, celebrating annually on June 19th, the freedom and achievement of African Americans. To me, the particular exact date that is in history, there are a number of dates that really filter out as important dates. This seems to be the date that is singled out as the date that recognizes all of those dates. So, Commissioner Burney.
Yes, thank you very much, Chair. And I hope maybe I can make this a little easier for commissioners that don't know. And by the way, I would love to make the motion when the time comes.
Thank you.
This is not something that's important to the BIPOC community alone. This is important to every American. Slavery is the original sin of this country. It is very clear to me after a lifetime of working for social justice and equal opportunity that not only should this, and by the way, you know, like many of you, when I was a kid, we had Washington's birthday, Lincoln's birthday, Columbus Day. Things change as society evolves and more voices that have been stifled and historically excluded from our history books finally are allowed and demand to be heard. So from my perspective, Juneteenth is a holiday that is overdue as a permanent holiday. Not a floating holiday. I think that demeans the significance of what this represents. And all of the evidence accumulated by staff suggests that other units of government, from comparative counties to state and federal, recognize this as a permanent holiday. I think we need to get off the duff, do the same thing. And whenever you're ready for a motion, Chair, I'm most ready to make it.
Thank you, Chair Burney. Vice Chair Trieger. Commissioner Burney, Vice Chair Trieger.
Thank you, Chair. Since Commissioner Burney indicated he'd like to make the motion, I'll leave that to him. It's what I was going to offer to do. And I just briefly want to say two things. One is to the comments about we added Indigenous Peoples Day. We didn't add a holiday. We retooled our acknowledgement. We took a holiday that was already in existence and appropriately and past time renamed it to refocus the attention that we're giving on that day. So I don't see an equivalency in this case. I think regardless of what any of us commissioners think about this holiday, the reason it's important is that this is what the Black community has asked of us, expects of us, is looking to us to do as leaders to be respectful, to honor and acknowledge the importance of this day. So while I may have my own personal opinions or interpretations of history or understanding about why this matters, really the reason it matters is because this is what our Black employees and community members and community partners have indicated is meaningful to them. I think it's also important to note it's a federal holiday. There are celebrations in the community, so keeping it to a date specific, a calendar specific date is important to really focus the attention the way it needs to be on the significance of the date. And finally, it's my understanding, I would think that it's actually easier on payroll department and division managers and so on to have a fixed in time holiday that everybody can plan around. It's the same year in and year out rather than a floating holiday. So Commissioner Burney beat me to asking to make the motion, so I will stand ready to second his motion. Thank you for the time. Thank you so much to the staff for all your work to bring this to us, to people who wrote in, messaged me personally and gave testimony this morning in support of this. I'm very excited that we're at this moment.
Thank you, Vice Chair Trieger. And your last one regarding the ease of staff was a point that I would have made. So I think that's lesser on the list of important elements here. But Commissioner Burney, I'm going to turn to you for the motion. I see no further hands raised in the queue for discussion prior to the motion. After the motion is made, Ms. Amato, I'll turn to you for a statement, for the statement if you wish to. And Commissioner Burney, in making the motion, this is an important motion. In making the motion, I'll grant you the latitude if you so desire, if you choose, to read the entire order.
Thank Thank you, Chair. And Commissioner Trieger, my intent was not to beat you to any punch. I apologize for that. My intent was to demonstrate how strongly I feel about this particular item. Chair, I move approval to recognize Juneteenth and designate June 19th as a paid holiday for all eligible Lane County employees. That's all I need to do to make the motion, Chair. Thank you so much.
Very good. Thank you, Commissioner Burney.
I'll second.
Moved by Commissioner Burney, seconded by Vice Chair Trieger. Discussion to the motion, and I'll look to you, Ms. Amato, first.
Just want to thank you all. I think it's really exciting to be at a time where we're really reimagining spaces of belonging, diversifying, our community, but also I think more importantly, bridging some of the trust that we need to regain back with our communities. So I'm just excited to be part of this, and thank you all for your support and for listening, and for engaging in a process that I know is a little bit different. So,
thank you, Ms. Amato. Then to the motion, Commissioner Buck.
Thank you, Chair. I just want to appreciate the work that was put into thoughtfully reviewing and preparing this for us today. It's certainly a deep part of the equity work that we are doing and moving forward with. It is my deep honor and pleasure to be able to support this particular motion and resolution. I know that we'll be doing more equity work in the future. And if it looks like this, I'm all for it. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Commissioner Buck. Then before the vote, if this motion passes, Juneteenth shall be observed as a paid holiday for all eligible Lane County employees in accordance with practices outlined in the Administrative Procedures Manual and collective bargaining agreements, effective beginning June 19th, 2022. Then with no further discussion, I will call for the vote. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Passes 5-0 unanimously. Thank you very much for the presentation. Thank you for the unanimous vote to the board.
Thank you very much.
Thank you all.
Then we will move along to item 7 on our agenda, which is County Council. Mr. Dingle or County Council, do we have any announcements today? I see and hear none. Then we'll move along to County Administration. To item 8A, we have a discussion. It's a status update on the progress of the Affordable Housing Action Plan. And Mr. Mokrahajski, you have a panel today. I'll turn it over to you to introduce the panel.
Thank you, Chair. Long-awaited update, I know, for the board on the status of and progress of our Affordable Housing Action Plan. We have with us Sarai Johnson, who has transitioned from her role as the Joint Shelter and Housing Strategist to be focused exclusively on Lane County as our Shelter and Housing Strategist. And with us for the first time as our Policy Director is Steve Adams. This Shelter and Housing Affordable Housing Action Plan and our work related to shelter and housing policy and strategies falls under Mr. Adams and Ms. Johnson's work. So pleased to have both of them here today. And I think I'll turn it, Sarai, are you going to take it?
I think Steve has a couple of words to share before I start.
Great, thank you. Go ahead, Steve.
Thank you so much, Mr. Mokrahajski, Chair Farr, and board. It's a pleasure to be with you today in this new role. I really just wanted to take a moment to recognize the work that our colleague Judy Williams has invested in the past in advancing this Affordable Housing Action Plan. I have spent some of my previous 3 weeks or so in this new role, really trying to come up to speed on the excellent work that has been invested in the past. And Sarai Johnson, my new colleague here in this capacity, has been very patient with me as well in bringing me up to speed. So with that, I'm merely just going to introduce my colleague, Ms. Johnson.
Thank you, Steve, and thank you, Chair and Board, for having us today. I'm excited to share with you some of the updates around this work that we've been working on over the past few months. Last time we came to give you an update was in July, and that one was a long time coming. So fortunately, we've been able to devote a little bit more time to this and are making some progress. So today we're going to cover a couple of different things. First, in the draft strategic plan, we set a goal to make housing available and affordable to people at every level of income. And some of the things we'll talk about today are a basic update on what we've accomplished so far this calendar year, a status of our prioritized actions as to how we're moving them forward. And then we'll dig into housing production strategies and how Lane County might support housing production across the county. And then finally, of course, making lots of time for board feedback to make sure that we're on track to fulfill the vision that the board had in mind when adopting the Affordable Housing Action Plan. What we've done in 2022 so far is continued our collaboration with Better Housing Together. We've initiated some conversations with financial institutions around different ways that we might be able to fund alternative types of housing, started conversations with the Home Builders Association to listen and hear what their barriers and challenges are to building in Lane County and municipalities, evaluated Oregon's housing production strategies, which we'll dig into a little bit more later here today. And then we've developed an approach for Lane County to support housing production and started to gather input from stakeholders about faith-based land used for housing production. So we're making a little bit of progress by at least starting some conversations and getting some of this moved forward. As far as the next actions that we indicated we'd be working on last time and that are in the Affordable Housing Action Plan, one is to integrate high and immediate impact projects into our annual work plan, which is in progress. And at the last time we met, we talked about the priorities we would be pushing forward. At this time, we'll go into a little more detail on those in a moment. We'll also we are currently working on cross-pollinating with other countywide plans. One of the great benefits of the new policy team is connectedness between the climate action plan and the housing plan, continuing to work with emergency management on how to support preparedness and resilience around all of these things, and any other plan around health, housing, and ways that the county is intervening in those issues. We also have started to initiate a housing production plan to specify production goals, support strategies to increase all housing types by income levels, coordinate cross-jurisdictional efforts countywide, and start to measure progress toward production goals. So I'll also be presenting to you some proposed metrics that are a little bit more in depth than the ones that you've seen before towards the end of this presentation. As far as the priorities we indicated we'd be working on as of the beginning of this calendar year in January, one, of course, as I just mentioned, is aligning our housing objectives with all of our related plans at the county level. I expect that work to be completed in July of 2022 to make sure that we're on track to mix and match what we're doing and making sure that housing is a part of those plans and that housing also reflects the plans that exist around climate and other important issues in the county. We also are, as an ongoing effort, continuing to evaluate county-owned and underutilized properties for housing options. We are working currently with the first right of refusal program we started a year or so ago with our facilities team and property management so that we could evaluate incoming tax foreclosed properties for appropriate use as housing, whether affordable or otherwise. We also have not yet started our leveraging of our educational institutions to increase skilled labor and design builds. That is something that I expect to start by September 2022, once the summer is kind of continuing on and we've got all of our objectives aligned in the right direction. We also will be continuing to convene innovative financial collaborations to expand our equitable resource opportunities to spur more unit development as well as access to housing. I believe that I'll be able to deliver a plan for that as of July, which will be our next update. Also looking to create a plan by September for supporting rural communities by piloting community land trusts and limited equity cooperatives. That will also go hand in hand with the work together with our rural communities to develop municipality-based housing production strategies and support each municipality in reaching their housing production goals. And then to spark Faith Community Housing Project, essentially seeing where and how we can leverage land that's owned by faith communities to build affordable housing and or other types of housing. I would like to have a plan for that delivered by September 2022 as well. And then the final thing here is, of course, encouraging BIPOC home ownership with the Home Ownership Seed Fund, which is funded by ARPA. We are planning to put out an RFP shortly after the beginning of our new fiscal year in July and August. I believe the focus of that RFP is going to be heavily pushed toward production of affordable units rather than more on the side of supporting financially, depending on what proposals are made to us. So hopefully we'll be able to leverage that money into a really useful direction and support folks who have not traditionally had as much access to homeownership opportunities, who've in fact been excluded systemically from having those opportunities. This is more of a refresher. I heard earlier that in Commissioner Bozovich's mind, the 16,403 number is very fresh. This is simply a reminder to give us some grounding in what we're trying to accomplish over the next 5 years. If you see this kind of bottom part, oops, pardon me. I lost it. Okay. Let's just get through this animation and I'll stop trying to use my cursor to show you. So under growth, under regional projection of need, the totals will need to build about 7,000 units to adhere to kind of our population growth projections. We also have, of course, underproduced housing countywide for a very long time. So making up for that is about 6,200. And then, of course, the number of housing units that are needed for people who currently are unhoused would be about 3,100 units, which also jives with the numbers that we see on our homeless by name list. To give some perspective as to what we've done over the last 5 years, I've collected the building permits that have been issued from 2017 to 2021. This does not include public housing, though we can add to these numbers 344 additional units that Homes for Good has produced in that time period. You'll see from 2017 to 2021, we actually have seen a major increase in the development of housing units across housing unit types. I've just compiled all of them here, but the census data does split it out by single family, duplexes, and so forth. So if you are interested in those details, please let me know and I'll share that information with you. So that total is about 6,623 units of housing developed in Lane County over the past 5 years. And as we're looking at our regional housing needs assessment number of 16,403, we can see there's quite a gap. However, I did want to calculate the trends. And so I took the rate of change year over year and compiled that. The change between 2017 and 2021's numbers was a 129% increase, but the averages came out to about a 1,325 unit per year building rate. And that is also configured into a 28% year over year growth trajectory. If we were to be able to build housing about 1,325 a year at a 28% year over year growth, then at this current pace, we would reach 14,705 750-ish units over the next 5 years, which puts us kind of in between the regional housing needs analysis low projection of just under 11,000 units and the high projection at 16,000 plus units. So this difference is a difference of 1,653 units, making it seem pretty hopeful to me that we might be able to bridge that gap with some of the policies and housing production strategies that we will be entertaining today. So housing production strategies have been implemented by the state as part of the Regional Housing Needs Analysis Project from HB 2003. The primary ways that they've indicated we can do a good job of increasing housing production is reduce regulatory and financial impediments, create regulatory and financial incentives, provide access to local, state, and federal resources, and to allow for local innovation on housing production strategies. And some specific tools are included in the board packet, which is the whole state housing production strategies toolkit, and that is a number of specific policies and practices that the state has compiled and recommends under these different categories. So the first category is zoning and code changes. So where the county can have impact on that level, it certainly is within the jurisdiction of unincorporated areas, and we can also support each municipality in identifying which of these strategies might be useful for them. The next, why is my slideshow being so exciting and finicky today? Pardon me. So we've got the second category is reducing regulatory impediments. So places where people are running into barriers. We heard a little bit about that in public comment earlier today, replacing a dwelling in the same location. So that would be one place where we also can make some differences. Category C is adding financial incentives to make sure that we're able to produce adequate numbers of housing units. Category D is adding financial resources, whether those are accessed at the federal, state, or other level. And then considering tax exemption and abatement, which of course the county will play a role in no matter which municipality is interested in doing this, as we have to get a lot of different jurisdictions to agree to those. And then finally, land acquisition, lease, and partnership. So how can the county leverage land and move forward on the land that we have in hand, and also the opportunities to add to that for the use of developing housing that's affordable to people of many different income levels. And then finally, custom options, which is where we're allowing for that local innovation. I believe some of the strategies that have been outlined in the Affordable Housing Action Plan, especially around supporting rural communities with limited equity cooperatives and community land trusts, as well as a few other strategies, could fall into that category. And so just to clarify again, I know you've seen this specific kind of slide before, but first connecting with municipal leaders to collaborate on refining the UGB production targets that have been indicated by the regional housing needs analysis, add unincorporated targets. For right now, that number is 0. So it may be possible that if some municipalities are not able to reach their projected goals, that there could be some level of makeup on the county side in unincorporated areas. We also need to select appropriate production metrics and to measure implementation project progress and adapt as the population adjusts. This would be a place where I'll work with community partners as well as you all to identify how many units we would like to project building in each year of this 5-year plan. Then leveraging these housing production strategies that we just went over so that cities within the county can integrate these specific strategies for their location and learn from partners, municipalities, and other counties so that we can continue to improve and refine our plans for production of housing and creating more affordable and available housing in Lane County together. Here are some of the metrics that I'm suggesting we might want to consider. First, of course, just pure numbers. I have 0 to 120 AMI as one of the kind of key cornerstones. One being the number of housing units that were developed by Homes for Good, number of affordable housing units by other developers, and workforce housing units fitting kind of in that 120% AMI and below. Then we have our market rate housing unit number production and at 120 plus AMI, also applicable for all of the other, income levels below that. And then overall, I think some worthy targets that we could measure would be reaching a healthy market sales inventory of 6 months, which is a healthy sales market right now. In the last several months or perhaps even year, we've hovered between a month and less than a month of inventory in the housing market, which has, of course, continued to drive prices up and make it more difficult for people to purchase homes. We've got a potential metric of reducing the number of cost burdened households in the county, meaning that they pay 30% or more of their gross income on housing, and extremely cost burdened folks who pay more than 50% of their gross income on housing. And then a % increase in vacancy rate, which would basically show us that we have a healthier rental market. Currently, our vacancy rate is 1.5% here. It's 3.3% in Oregon overall, and nationally, the number is 13.9%. So as you can see, we have a drastically constrained rental market compared to the national average and even compared to Oregon as a whole. And now, I think this is the fastest board presentation I've ever done. I'm just going to pat my own self on the shoulder for that. And thank you. I'll turn it back to you, Chair.
I'll pat you on the shoulder also. You know, I'd like to underline and embolden some of the things that you've said, but every single thing you said deserves underlining. Every single thing you said deserves being bold. So I'm not going to burden you with that. I'm going to keep mine very, very short. I'll have something more to say, but at this point, Ms. Johnson and Mr. Mokrzycki, anything further to presentation before we turn to the board for questions and comments?
No, I don't believe so, Chair.
Very good. Then I will look to the queue. And if, okay, I was going to say, if you don't raise a queue, I'll burden you with my stuff. So first in the queue, we have Commissioner Buck.
Thank you, Chair. I'm thrilled to see this presentation. It has a lot of the stuff that I was searching for and hoping for today. I do have a specific question, which is about the metrics exactly. How are we going to calculate that going forward? And how are we going to ensure that the public is well informed about those metrics?
Thank you, Commissioner Buck. Yes, that's a very good question. One of the pieces that needs to happen as soon as we identify these metrics is developing a process around how we're going to collect, store, analyze, and report on that data. So that will be something that I'll work on with the policy team so that we can have the right mechanisms in place to do that evaluation work. At the same time, I know that it has been a high priority of the board to create a public-facing communication strategy and website around what we're doing on housing and homelessness. That is something that I believe we'll be able to prioritize in the coming months. I've started working with Devin Ashbridge and Jason Davis, as well as a PIO at Homes for Good to develop a strategy around that and align some of our strategies. So that will be something that I'll add to my next update and make sure that we have a plan for that and how we're going to produce it. I think it is past time that we need to be more explicit about what we're accomplishing and what our plans are to improve the conditions of our housing crisis and our homelessness crisis.
Thank you, Commissioner Buck. I see no further hands raised in the queue. I'll give it a moment before I start talking. There we go. Commissioner Bozevich.
Thank you, Chair. So I'm pleased with the report. Yeah, I have that 16403. I have this thing where I'll remember your telephone number before your name. So when that number was presented a few months back, that really stuck in my head because I understood that we had never built at that level annually ever in this county. And that was just a shocking number to look at. What we needed to get to a balanced housing market is just a big lift. And yeah, I submitted testimony to the city of Eugene as they were adopting their, and I'm going to get the whatever HIP stands for wrong. Their housing implementation plan, I think, is what it stood for. They were targeting less housing than we need to hit that 16403 by a significant amount. So as we talk about working with our partners, the city of Eugene has the ability to provide the majority of that housing. And we need to continue to try and get them to target the correct amount of housing, and at the same time keep pushing for their review of buildable lands and possible expansion of UGB, because I believe that additional land will do a significant amount to relieve our housing market, particularly now with the adoption of the middle housing codes that are going to happen by June 30th. that's going to be such an important factor. It's great seeing some of our rural partners like Cottage Grove and Florence adopt MUPTs and are working towards that. But, you know, when I look at Florence, they're so constrained about UGB expansion and what's even in their UGB, the ability to build because of wetlands, beaches and dunes overlays, and other issues and tsunami zones. The Siuslaw School District lost about a dozen teachers over the last year because they couldn't find housing. I have somebody that has contacted me that wants to put an ADU on their property. You know, that's RR up North Fork Road, it's 5-acre RR lot. And because the state hasn't completed their wildfire risk assessment map stuff, we can't adopt our rules. The idea that incorporated can't be part of that, I think we definitely have to include unincorporated Lane County as helping meet that need. And ADUs are part of it. Pulling some of the barriers and getting to yes for folks that want to build in unincorporated is really important because it is part of the mixture. Not everything's going to happen inside of the UGB. So I appreciate the report. It's scary to me when I look at a 1.3% vacancy rate. That is just, you know, incredibly scary, and you know, and our need from the 3,000 units for folks that are currently homeless, you know, including a former commissioner now. You know, these numbers are daunting, and I just, you know, appreciate all the data you're bringing. I was so happy to see the metrics on building permits. That came from a question I asked you. So I really appreciate that answer on the past building permit production, because it was kind of a question. It's like 16,403 over 5 years. I'm not, you know, my memory serves me. That doesn't seem like that's something we've ever even come close to. And sure enough, we're pretty far away from that. I mean, we've come close to half that production. So we're counting on a lot of growth in a highly constrained industry that's got a retiring workforce. So they're facing their own silver tsunami, and you know, all sorts of supply chain issues and everything that's making projects take longer. So you've got a tough task ahead of you, and everything we can do to support that as a board, just let us know.
Commissioner Bozovich, thank you very much. And on the reverse side of your description of Eugene, where I was a city councilor for 10 years, the city of Springfield gave us a great presentation last night on some of the things that they are doing to move forward with housing, which I believe is a great segue to Commissioner Burney.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, it is interesting, isn't it? That the city of Springfield is really on the cutting edge of a lot of this. I don't think that staff, forgive me, I'm coming at this a different way. I think the people that have the great challenge ahead are not staff that have living wage jobs and are able to purchase homes. It's all of those people that either are homeless, are in temporary shelters, are you know, I think that one of the first and foremost things that we as a board, and I hope this country realizes, is that housing is infrastructure. I don't want to just talk about sewer that gets to housing, or water that gets to housing, or electric lines that get to housing, or roads that get to housing, or broadband. We need to look at housing as infrastructure. And Mr. Adams, I'm kind of targeting this to you, because as we start looking at what the federal infrastructure package looks like, and we look at ways in which there might be workarounds, I think understanding that housing is infrastructure might enable us to do some creative things. That's number one. Number two, Commissioner Bozovich rightfully mentioned that we've never been in a position like this. We've never achieved those kinds of production goals. And I simply want to add, we've never been in a period of such public disinvestment for so long in housing, in subsidized housing. And so we're experiencing two extremes, one related to the other. I say this as someone that 40 years ago developed 160 units under one federal program that still exists. And when we talk about rural rental housing, I hope we look at this. I've said this multiple times over the years, but Farmers Home Administration's rural rental housing, section 515, still exists. And it exists to build, at least a mere 40 years ago, 40 to 60 unit garden apartments in rural areas that can be developed to condo specifications. So after the financing of 20 to 30 years is over, they can be converted to home ownership. So I don't want us to lose sight of that. My real question here, and another statement, 3 years ago as a new commissioner, I heard about this TAC report. And when I was asking questions, I was told that this report, when everything was in place, would end homelessness in Lane County in 3 years. That was 3 years ago. The caveat, of course, from the consultants was when everything was in place. Well, I also remember when I was the head of the Lane Regional Workforce Quality Committee in the mid-90s, Governor Roberts then created a new workforce investment training, and the goal was Oregon would have the best trained workforce by the year 2000. The reason I mention these is sometimes we have rhetorical goal and aspirational goals, but we don't really have a properly engineered plan to get there. And I think this is so critical that when we talk about a 5-year plan, somehow government that doesn't build anything really, or much of anything, is going to have strategies that will incent markets, because that's what ultimately we're talking about, right? We are incenting private investment, which means there have to be business opportunities in construction of this level of housing. Anything we do will be a drop in the bucket. So I'm very interested in the relationship, Mr. Adams and Ms. Johnson, between each strategy mentioned and what you project and why that will impact actual homes built. I think that's critical. I think some of, and you may have that. I really anticipate that because I know you're dedicated to this. But I want to understand how we smartly and strategically use public dollars, which is the tail. It's not the body of the beast. Use public dollars to actually incent and encourage markets to support what is needed. And I offer my assistance with that because that's exactly what my last business did. And that's the only way we're going to get out of this mess. So thank you very much for your dedication, your hard work, and we'll just keep on keeping on. Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Commissioner Burney. Good words. I did not actually hear a question in there. Was there one?
I think there was a question that can't yet be answered, and I didn't want to put either Sarai or Steve on the spot. But the question had to do with each strategy that's mentioned, specifically, what difference will that make? And quantitatively, what difference will that make in the amount of housing stock as a result of the county's work in that area? That was it. Perfect. Thank you, sir.
Very good. Then Ms. Johnson, go ahead and respond.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Commissioner Burney. I don't have the specific quantitative number off the top of my head. What I will say is the housing production strategies table that is included in the board packet does attempt to answer some of those questions, or it clarifies the kinds of impacts each of these interventions might have on housing production. It also divides these out by the type of neighborhood and market conditions exist there. So it's a really comprehensive look at many different strategies that local government can take. One, of course, that piece of removing those impediments and the regulatory barriers and challenges and also the incentives, as you've mentioned. So I encourage everyone to take a deep look at that. That will get us started, but I will endeavor to do my best to answer some of those questions in the next few updates that we have once I get more details on that.
No, I thank you so much. I didn't mean to put you on the spot. If I might indulge the chair, another thing I'm very interested in is when you're looking at this, how many units are you talking about down the road producing for the rental market versus the home ownership market? Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Johnson and Commissioner Burney. And I will say that Commissioner Buck provided a part of the answer in her comments when she's talked about metrics. How do we measure and how do we report the measurements so the public can see success toward the goals that we've established? Vice Chair Trieger.
Thank you, Chair. Well, thank you, everyone. That was a great segue to one of the things I wanted to ask about. But before I do, about the rental metrics, before I do, I also just want to zoom out and say how exciting it is to have this presented to us with Steve Adams present, that we have a policy team now, because this work requires a real focus on policy, both our own internal organizational policy, but also intergovernmentally and up to the state and federal level. So I think it's so important that we're now taking a truly holistic look from a systems and a programmatic and a policy approach to this housing crisis. I've also been listening and hearing lots of bits and pieces about the connection between, or the different nuances of the issue as it plays out in rural areas and unincorporated areas within different cities within the county. And I think what's really important too is to keep that holistic look and not play a sort of zero-sum game or have the different aspects of the work compete with one another. We really have to keep everything moving together at the same time, or it's just a giant game of whack-a-mole and we're creating different problems elsewhere. So that's just a good piece to hold. I will just give as a personal example, because it literally like 3 doors down from me, there's a house. I live in the friendly neighborhood. It's not a high end. It's a pretty sort of average Eugene neighborhood full of homes built in the 70s ranch style, like 3-bedroom, 1.5 bath kind of homes. And there's a house a few doors down from me that sold in 2015 for $160,000. And then more than double in 2021 for $350, was listed and sold for $350. And then just last month was listed for $575,000 and sold for $665,900. This is like a not even 2,000 square foot, 3-bedroom, 2-bath ranch style home built in the 70s. So this is what the housing shortage is doing. It's yes, we have unhoused folks. Yes, we have renters who are cost burdened, but we don't even have an entry-level housing market for folks anymore. So just given that real world example. To that and about rentals, I am also very interested in knowing the rental versus home ownership track of housing stock and new production. But I'm also very curious to know, I want to be sure we're including the U of O in our intergovernmental cross-jurisdictional conversations, because I get lots and lots of questions about how is all this student housing going up? It's many more stories in height than market housing. It seems to go up quickly. It seems to go up through different processes. I don't understand what the projections are for how many students are going to be living in our community, and is it really going to ease the rental market within the community to create more student housing? So that piece about student housing and that development and the projections for enrollment for the U of O, I think just has to be part of our conversation. And because I don't have answers to those questions I get asked, it's pretty opaque to me how that all works and how that interplays with needs elsewhere in the city and in the county. And then lastly, just a request that the slides, which while they may have been behaving badly for you in making the presentation, the information in them is wonderful, and particularly that one that arrives at the 16,000 plus units with the different columns. Even just that snapshot of a slide is tremendously helpful. So if those could please get shared around, would very much appreciate it. Thank you. I'm really excited for this work and the direction we're headed.
Thanks, Vice Chair. That's a great ask, that last one. You know, there are so many things to talk about with the affordable housing. We all have great stories. Why affordable housing is important. Every single person on the board, every person in the room, you know, it's been a part of my personal life since my very earliest memories. In 1965, we immigrated to Tillamook County. Now, nobody can move to Tillamook County now because of the cost of housing, but in 65, we immigrated to Tillamook County. And immediately, the three families, my sister, my brother, their families, and our direct family, lived in a single-wide mobile home in Kennedy's trailer park. And it was comfortable, you know, it's crowded, but comfortable. Shortly after, my dad was able, because we all worked, except for my 2-year-old sister, we all worked, my dad was able to buy a small portion of a dairy farm up on the Trask River. And we moved 3 mobile homes onto that small portion of the dairy farm and lived in comfort. And we all lived there together on Ron Sanders' dairy farm on the Trask River. We still own the property to this day. My point with that is you couldn't do that today, you know? If that type of affordable housing had not been there for us, then we would not have been able to afford what ultimately became our family little tiny farm up on the Trask River. You can't do it today. So what we have to do as a county is how do we find ways to replace some of the things that regulations and restrictions have made it impossible for us to do in this state, in this county, and in the cities that we live in. And that's what we're talking about for the future. And that's what really is exciting about the energy surrounding the conversation today, Sarai and Steve Adams, Steve Mokrowski. That is what is so exciting about this conversation, because we're all engaged, we're all on board, and we are all eager to find ways to produce affordable housing. So with that, Commissioner Burney, you said that we need to look at housing as infrastructure. We do, because bureaucracy looks at the cost of housing and how to get housing, and they forget that housing is the ultimate goal. They think about what does it take to get housing, and here's how we can make it more difficult to produce housing. The ultimate goal is to find ways to allow housing. Ms. Johnson, Mr. Adams, Ms. Mokrowski, anything else you'd like to add? Then what a wonderful discussion that is really just the tip of the iceberg. And Commissioner Burney, I'm sorry, I did not see your hand raised. We'll go back to you before I say farewell to this item.
Thank you, sir. First, can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Steve. Sarai and Steve, is one component of what you're putting together how we can help seniors stay in their homes?
I do believe that's going to be an important part. I think aging in place is something that I personally have worked on for a number of years in my career. And that is certainly something that we can do to leverage existing housing. And I think have some good partnerships with organizations like HomeShare Oregon and others to support that. So yes, thank you for asking that question.
Oh no, thank you, Chair. Thank you, sir. I did not see it in any of the slides, so I just wanted to call that out. Thank you.
Once again, a wonderful conversation with a whole lot of points that are just kind of simmering to the surface. But you watch a pot boil, you see a bubble here, a bubble there. That's what we're watching, is bubbles coming up at the top of the surface to really, hopefully, make a difference for the future. Then without further ado, I will bid adieu to this particular agenda item and move along, Mr. Mokrowski, to 8B, which is administrative announcements.
Thank you, Chair. I have a couple items, and I want to first just say that I've actually made a personal commitment to limit the time that I'm on my phone around other people. And I want to just call out the fact that, you know, oftentimes we're in these meetings and we're remote right now. And many of us are, I certainly am, oftentimes I'm, you know, texting or emailing or responding to things that are coming up, but that also sends a message, right? When it appears that we're distracted or doing other things because nobody else knows what else we're distracted with. So I just wanted to mention that. I wanted to say that I'm working on that, and I want to make sure that we're sending the right message to folks, that I'm sending the right message to folks about our attention here in the meetings, and that if we are on our device, oftentimes we're doing responding to these issues that are coming up, but something that, you know, I am and we all are conscious of the perception that can create for folks. So continue to make an effort on that front. A couple of quick items I just want to share with the board. And I will look at my phone here because I have this email in front of me. The Commissioner Bozovich had asked at our last board meeting, there's a board request assignment regarding the Lane Fire Authority tax rate. There was some confusion about the tax rate that had been created. Actually, the submission from the Fire Authority was incorrect. And so communication went out from our assessment and taxation. We rely on the taxing authority, in this case, the Lane Fire Authority, to submit correct information. The correct information wasn't submitted, so misinformation was given to those affected by the tax rate, and then we had to put out both the Lane Fire Authority as well as assessment and taxation, Lane County Assessment and Taxation had to put out corrective information to make that clear. So Commissioner Bozovich and the commissioners had asked that we just reach out and make sure that we're informing for our part on behalf of the county, because of course everyone knows we have 80 plus taxing districts in Lane County, but Lane County Assessment and Taxation is the entity that collects all of those property tax dollars from taxpayers and then distributes them. So when you get your tax bill, of course, it comes from Lane County Assessment and Taxation. We collect all of those resources and then we distribute the vast majority of it. Of course, we know Lane County keeps about 11 cents on the dollar of the resources that we collect for county related services. Most of it is distributed to cities and school districts, and in this case, the Fire Authority. So just a quick update that our assessor, Mike Coles, has done several things to reach out to those affected. He has done media interviews, created a web page, and reached out via targeted social media to residents affected there. We've been in active communication with the Lane Fire Authority and with residents affected there. So Devin Ashbridge and Mike Coles, our assessor, have worked together on that work. And so the assessor feels as though he's done everything necessary and possible to communicate with affected residents in the Lane Fire Authority District. And so we will be closing that assignment unless there's any further discussion on that. And then I have a quick update on our budget process going forward, if there aren't any questions on the Lane Fire Authority.
I see no hands. Oh, that's Commissioner Bozovich.
Very quickly, Chair, I just want to say thank you to Devin and Mike Coles. They definitely did some good work. My phone messages, et cetera, have dropped off significantly from people asking what the heck's going on. And I got my bill and paid my extra $106 and whatever it was cents. So it worked out for the best in the long run. And I think it also just calls and it makes people understand one of the reasons the Fire Authority went for this levy is they're severely understaffed. And that's probably why the mistake went by, their lack of administrative staff. And on our end, the state has disinvested in the assessment process by gradually having our CAFA grant cover less and less the actual cost of running the assessment department, where we don't really get money from all these districts to collect their taxes and distribute them. The state's supposed to be supporting that, and they're just not keeping up their end of the bargain. So we're short-staffed at assessment and taxation. The Fire Authority's short-staffed. This was probably something that was going to happen eventually somewhere. When you look at those kind of conditions going on, I'm just really happy with the work and communications that have happened since then, and it worked out for the best. So thank you to the board for supporting my request and getting this, helping get the communications out so people understood what happened. And people aren't generally happy about writing another check, but they weren't terribly large bills that came out.
Thank you, Commissioner Bozovich. Back to you, Steve.
Okay, final thing I want to update the board on is, of course, you now have received your budget, your proposed budget document for next year. And I'm sure you all have read through already over the weekend. You read through this nearly 500-page document, and you're well acquainted with all the important information in here. But we're looking forward to kicking off this budget process next Tuesday. So for those watching, Tuesday, May 3rd at 5:30 p.m., we will have a virtual budget presentation to our budget committee comprised of the 5 commissioners and 5 appointed residents in Lane County. That will be virtual. And then the remainder of our budget committee meetings will happen in person. So we will be meeting in the board conference room, the Board of Commissioners conference room, which is on the 2nd floor of the Public Services building. So the budget committee will be there. We're working to sort of limit the number of staff that will need to be in the room so that we have, we can do that all appropriately and safely. Those will also be televised. And then so those meetings occur May 5th at 2 p.m., May 10th at 2 p.m., and May 12th at 2 p.m. And then we have our budget adoption, or I should say the budget approval. So the processes are, of course, the 4 technical processes are the county administrator proposes the budget committee of the 5 commissioners and 5 appointed residents approve the budget, and then the 5 commissioners adopt the budget. And then in the course of the year, we have 3 or 4 supplemental budgets where it's amended. So proposal, approval, adoption, and then amendments is how that works. So on May 19th, we will then also be in person at 5:30 p.m. for the approval. This is the budget committee's deliberation, public comment, and approval. That will be the first opportunity for the public in person to provide public testimony before the budget committee approves that budget. So looking forward to that. And then, of course, the Board of Commissioners will be in person for its next board meeting after that time on May 24th. Harris Hall, and that will be May 19th will be in Harris Hall. So May 19th, the budget deliberation and public comment for the budget committee will be in Harris Hall. And then the Board of Commissioners regular board meeting on May 24th at 9 a.m. will also be in Harris Hall. Those will be hybrid meetings that are both in person and virtual. So just wanted to share all of that. Look forward to that budget process and encourage folks that are interested to tune in and provide comments either on May 3rd when we propose the budget. Those can be provided virtually or on May 19th in person or virtually when the budget committee approves the document. That's it for me, Chair, unless you have any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Mokrajski. I see no questions, so we'll move along. I'm going to be reading us into executive session, and I'll state a time that we'll re-emerge in executive session. Following executive session, if there's no other business, we'll go into recess until our 1:30 time certain board meeting. So with that, without any further comments, I'm going to read us into executive session. The Board of County Commissioners will meet in executive session to conduct deliberations with persons designated by the governing body to carry on labor negotiations. This executive session is held pursuant to ORS 192.6602D, which allows the Board of Commissioners to meet in executive session for the purposes listed. Representatives of the news media and designated staff shall be allowed to attend the executive session. All other members of the audience are asked to leave the room. Representatives of the news media are specifically directed not to report on any of the deliberations during the executive session, except to state the general subject of the session as previously announced. No decision may be made in executive session. We reserve the right to come back out into public session should the need arise. So at the sound of my gavel, we will be recessing the Board of County Commissioners meeting, reconvening in executive session. It's now 10:49 on my time clock. So let's reconvene at 10:55 in executive session at the sound of my gavel.